Yedikule Fortress, unearthed centuries of history and panoramic views. Fener and Balat, vibrant neighborhoods painted in a kaleidoscope of colors. Miniaturk, explore Turkish wonder in miniature form. Ortaköy Mosque, a picturesque mosque with intricate architecture by the Bosphorus. Bosphorus Strait, the watery heart connecting two continents, offering stunning views. Join us in unlocking Istanbul's secrets and experiencing its captivating charm. Your adventure awaits. Youth break the boundaries, inspire the next.
Hello everyone, this is Zoha Javed from Pakistan, a student of public policy from NUTS. Currently I'm serving as the CSR manager at Emarat Group, constituting Emarat, Grana.com, Agency 21 and Corruption. I'm coming to Istanbul Youth Summit 2023 with a unique, environmentally and socially responsible project that promotes the SDG 11 of sustainable cities and communities. I cannot wait to connect with young leaders from around the world. I strongly believe that it is the youth that is the real change pioneer in any country. So what are you waiting for? Now it's your turn to join Istanbul Youth Summit.
Hello, my name is Omar, I am from Egypt and I am currently studying medicine. Throughout my life I have developed a goal that has been growing with me up to this point, which is to leave a positive impact on the world and at the same time leave something for people that they will remember me for. In the mind of a student, this sounds very difficult to achieve, but I know that each step I take daily will help me achieve this goal one day. Many of my steps have led me to be recording this video to you guys and to be proudly part of Istanbul Youth Summit, a place where I could finally share my ideas with young talented leaders from all over the world. And this won't be just a small step towards my goal, but a very, very huge leap. And to all the young talent leaders out there, it's your turn to take the same leap and it's your turn to join Istanbul Youth Summit. See you there!
Hello Changemakers, it's Sylvia speaking here. I'm from Indonesia and I just earned my biology degree from University of Gadjah Mada. I decided to join Istanbul Youth Summit because I was very excited to meet all the young leaders from all across the world in finding lasting solutions to address our world's greatest challenges. I am feeling strongly committed to contribute meaningfully in making an impact in our global community. And I believe all the people, including you and me, should take part in tackling the world's issues and make a difference in our society. So now, it's your turn to join Istanbul Youth Summit. Do not miss this opportunity and I cannot wait for you to experience this wonderful journey with me. Bye!
Take your time to breathe. Take a moment and listen to your calling. It lies deep inside of you. Look beyond the line. Wide awake and feel the world you live in. There are chances away. And the spark of courage You got a voice, go make it heard. Nothing can hold you back from what is meant for you. You got a voice, go make it heard. Nothing can hold you back from what is meant for you. 'Cause we are the youth. Head up high, till we standing right. And we help each other so much that we can do.
All right. Well, hello, people. Greetings here from Indonesia. Good evening. Welcome to the 11th pre-orientation session of Istanbul Youth Summit 2024. Guys, welcome. Please let me know who are coming here. Please let me know in the chat. Type your name and where are you from? What time is it there in your country? Someone is asking about the attendance link. We will share the attendance link in the middle and the end of the Zoom meeting. Yeah, so we will just start the 11th pre-orientation. But before that, I'm not alone here in this meeting, guys. We have several speakers and our partner from Youth Break Boundaries, which is STEAR, that will share all of the materials today. I also have Juliette here with me. Hi, Juliette.
Hi.
Hi. And also James. Hi, James.
Hello, how are you?
Great. How about you?
I'm very good, thank you.
Okay. And Glyre.
Hello.
All right. It's all set and all good. And now, before we start, before I pass this to Juliette, I will introduce you guys about STEAR. So STEAR is an education technology startup that aims to make quality education more accessible and affordable through the technology. And this company developed an AI machine learning-based solution to assist teachers and schools in creating personalized adaptive learning experience for students. And the rest will be discussed by them, and also they will be performing and presenting the materials. And that's all. And I will just remind you guys about the payment. For those of you guys who haven't made the first and second batch of payment, please do that until at maximum next week. We will wait for next week, okay? At maximum, you have to fulfill the first and second batch of payment, okay? And that's all. I will just pass this to Juliette. Juliette, the time is yours.
Thanks very much. So, hi everyone, and welcome to today's Sustainability Symposium and Pre-Orientation panel. Thanks very much for joining wherever you are around the world currently. I see we have faces from basically everywhere. So I'm really excited to be presenting and moderating this panel, which has been organized in partnership with the Istanbul Youth Summit as part of the Youth Summit and the Student Think Tank for Europe-Asia Relations. So thanks very much for the introduction. So in this knowledge building panel today, we'll be covering the vast and fascinating issue of greening the economy, specifically the topics embracing circular economy and disruptive strategies for climate action. So today we're joined by two very impressive speakers who will deliver informative and engaging presentations. So first up, we have Glyre, Treasure Faeldonia, who will deliver his lecture on the pressing importance of adopting a circular economy using successful examples as inspiration. And then James Balzer will follow up with a talk on path dependence and pattern disruption in mitigating climate change. So before we begin, I'll just like to introduce our speakers briefly. So Glyre is currently pursuing an MSc in Global Development, Environment and Climate Change at the University of Manchester. He serves as a research lead at Keep the Change Youth Policy Lab, which is a youth-led organization in the Philippines, supported by Oxfam International and Asia Center. So this lab aims to address transportation infrastructure issues by guiding youth in policy interventions. He's also a young professional member at ICO-MOS Philippines, which is an advisory body to UNESCO on World Heritage Matters. And second, we have James, who's currently working as a project officer at the New South Wales Office of Energy and Climate Change. He's currently working on decarbonising Australian infrastructure through applying circular economy principles and enhancing government procurement practices to stimulate sustainable infrastructure development throughout the economy. So these two impressive speakers will be delivering their panels today. And I'll briefly introduce myself. I'm currently a master's student at the Peking University in a dual degree program with the London School of Economics. I'm studying international affairs, and I'm French and Australian with recent research focusing on Chinese public policy's influence on corporate ESG practices. So that's our team for today. And without further ado, we'll get right into the talks, starting up with Glyre's talk. Thanks very much to both of you for being here today, and enjoy the presentation, everybody.
Thank you for the very warm welcome, Juliette, and I'd like to extend my gratitude again for the opportunity to present to you all. Let me just set up my presentation. Can everyone see that? Perfect. Yes, like as Juliette has kindly introduced, I'll be presenting the concept of the circular economy today, and argued that the way forward is circular, underlining the pressing importance of adopting it and using successful examples as inspiration. Sorry. So for the agenda for the presentation today is as follows. 1, I'll be outlining the circular economy and its concept. 2, I'll be outlining the problems with the current economy, the linear economy. 3, I'll be calling for a pressing need of the circular economy, supplemented with successful examples as inspiration, and then I'll be wrapping up for the conclusion. I presume all of you guys are no stranger to the circular economy concept, but here's a nice refresher for you all. The circular economy is a transformative economic system where value is attributed to waste. Products and components of goods are kept within circulation in each stage in their life cycle. It offers a systems approach to economic development that is critical for stimulating collaboration, enabling innovation, and building resilience for an increasingly uncertain future. Waste is therefore not ignored and is turned into an opportunity for reinvestment. Additionally, it also involves stakeholders across the entire value chain to help rethink the way products are used and made. To fully visualize this concept, witness the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's butterfly diagram. As any other butterfly, it has 2 wings. On the left, witness the biodegradable wing, and to the right, witness the technical wing. In the interest of this presentation, I'll be focusing on the technical cycle wing, as most of the circular economic system and structure is founded on this. To fully first understand this diagram, we have to observe it from top to bottom, beginning with the final materials extraction, which is then organized in a parts manufacturer, assembled by the product manufacturer, distributed by the service provider, leading to the user. And as you can see as well, in the wing, it has multiple loops. All of it shares a core philosophy of sharing. In the first loop, you have the maintaining and prolonging. So I'll take an example of a car. You want to keep it at a high quality to ensure its viability and longevity. Next is reusing and redistributing. Take the example of vintage clothes. You may not see the value of your own clothes. However, the person next to you and your peers may see the real value, or the value of it, sorry. Then reverse refurbishing and remanufacturing. So the value of a product, say a phone, cannot be circulated within the value chain and may have to be sent back to the manufacturer to replace components or update cosmetics and to be sold out to the market again. And finally, you get the recycle stage. So when the product cannot be completely absorbed back to the value chain has to be completely disassembled again and returned to the parts manufacturer stage, repeating a cycle. For a completely sophisticated in-depth explanation of this, I highly recommend going to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation webpage. They have additional resources to supplement your knowledge of the topic. So regarding the technical wing, the circular economy can suggest 3 strategies in instituting circularity in business. So for one, it retains product ownership, where the producer remains responsible for the product, and instead of selling it, the producer rents or leases it to consumers. An excellent example of this is graduation gowns. As hence the name, people only buy these gowns at a certain special occasion, the gowns. And it may have little intrinsic value in terms of raw materials, but it provides the brand value of it using a special occasion can be significant. The second strategy is product life extension. Durability is a key variable, and it provides strong rationale for premium pricing. It also can provide help companies prevent their customers from defecting to a rival brand. Takes example of the Porsche Power Tools company. It extends the life of its tools by remanufacturing them, thereby enabling it to compete with new products from low-cost, low-quality producers. Lastly, we get design for recycling. It maximizes recoverability. It involves partnering with companies that have specific technological expertise, or they may be best able to use the materials recovered. Adidas partnered with Parley for the Oceans, wherein they use plastic waste to make textile thread from which Adidas used to manufacture its shoes and apparel. This prevents a huge amount of plastic waste going to the ocean. So the circular economy is.
Glyre, sorry, I'm just gonna let you know, I think your slides are stuck. We're still on your first slide.
Oh, is it? Oh, shoot, sorry.
Yes. Yeah, sorry, just wanted to let you know. There we go, perfect.
Yeah, sorry about
We
that.
can see them now.
Sorry,
Thank you.
yes. Yes, I'll quickly run through the 3 strategies: research, product ownership, product life extension, and design for recycling. So the circular economy isn't a concept that is born out of fresh air. It's a reaction to the current state of the status quo. And as you guys are well known and well knowledgeable of the global state of affairs, the linear economy itself poses a number of challenges. And one of them which is the social dilemma. For example, older people tend to be reluctant to change their behavior, while the younger generations, us, are more inclined to move away from the so-called make waste extractive model. There's a clear intergenerational impasse that prevents a holistic unity across society to work towards transitioning to a circular economy. And profoundly, it reproduces a mindset of not seeing the true value of items upon reaching the end of their usage. Evidently, it poses a number of environmental perils. I also presume you guys are no stranger to the number of environmental dilemmas we are facing around the world, such as aggravating climate change, microplastics, extreme loss of biodiversity. And what comes around, as it has now negatively affecting us humans, especially the vulnerable groups. The continuous utility of the linear model of the centuries has consequently left us a backlog that has yet to be fully answered for generations to come. On more stark light, the linear economy is also damaging for economies that are recipient of waste. Major example is e-waste, and this is more prominent in areas such as Southeast Asia. E-waste has become the world's fastest growing trash stream. About 53.6 million metric tons was generated alone in 2019, and only 17.4% thereof is properly recycled. It continues to grow up to this date with a growth rate of 20 to 25% rate. The World Health Organization even went so far to address that in that same year, the sum total of e-waste produced equals to as much as 350 cruise ships placed end to end to form a line of 125 kilometers long. Annually, the sum value of the materials components of the trash stream, the cycles amounts to 62.5 billion US dollars, which is 3 times more than the yearly output of the world's entire silver mines. And more profoundly and concerningly, there's about 120 countries have a lower annual GDP than the total value of materials wasted. A significant amount of our revenue is completely lost in this waste stream. So circular economy is a state on its own. It's a system, but why do we need it? And why is there an urge to implement it now. As I mentioned, circular economy is vital for fighting climate change, to fight the environmental dilemmas, and it helps drive society towards an uncertain and environmentally volatile future. Take building and construction industry, for example. It contributes to 70% of greenhouse gases globally. And just through circular use of four key industrial materials, cement, steel, plastics, and aluminium, circular economy strategies can help reduce global greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2050. Theoretically speaking, circular economy can be the medicine to wicked problems, which was first coined by Horst Wittel, and it is defined as current problems or dilemmas that are very emphasized and interconnected due to years and decades of accumulation. So if you're targeting, say, environment dilemmas, circular economy can only help focus on that. It can also focus on different facets such as poverty reduction and economic growth. It's a very multilateral concept that can cover the whole issues that's facing in our societies today. And if it's embedded adequately in global pledges, such as the Paris Agreement, countries can accelerate the transition to a low carbon economy, protect the natural environment, and create green, decent, and dignified jobs as well. Business speaking, it helps with cost cutting and boosting profitability. It is made possible through end-of-life and sustainable supply chain management, lower input prices, and less waste generation. This closed-loop supply chain approach enables businesses to sell their trash rather than dispose of them and generate additional revenue. The circular economy also promotes the concept of social equity in its execution. By being more involved in the whole process, in the whole circularity, people become more aware of their capability to participate in the decision-making process as part, which creates a sense of belonging. Circular economy should be the gold standard. The new status quo in society is to ensure that the resources of today are available for the generations tomorrow. So let's take a look at a number of examples. First of which is Japan. Japan is currently at the forefront in the world in terms of sustainability making and circular economy. But there's an astounding example of Kamikatsu, wherein they became the first town in the country to make a zero waste declaration, and they are now 80% on their way to achieve carbon neutrality by the end of this decade. They have a recycling plant called the Zero Waste Center, and it provides 45 categories of waste to the town. As you can see here, this is just the type of categories they have just outside, and they have more inside. And there are signs depicting what new items will be made out of those recycled items and how much money the town is saving by working with recycling companies rather than incinerating it. It's also an excellent way to remind them of their social responsibility. Through the system alone, it also gave rise to a number of jobs and enterprises. In fact, next to the center, there's a Kuru Kuru thrift shop where residents can drop off items they don't want anymore and others can take them for free. January last year, about 447 kilograms worth of items were rehauled, from unused batteries and sake glasses to furniture, maternity clothing, and toys. The number is displayed in a shop, which relates to the first point of reminding them of their social responsibility. Another excellent example is Singapore. As a country of no natural resources and fears of their only landfill running out of space by 2035, they have created a number of astute and adaptive steps. According to the Singapore government agency website, Center for Livable Cities, Singapore has successfully achieved at a very outstanding recycling rate of 99% in 2018 for its construction industry. As home to a number of shopping malls and food centers, they now segregate their food waste and use on-site treatment systems to convert it into liquid nutrients or compost for landscaping purposes, or water for non-potable use. The well-known landmark Gardens by the Bay recycles approximately 7% of its horticultural waste. So the food they grow within the vicinity is returned back to its system in the area. The garden retrieves tree branches and plant trimmings from its premises and other parks around the city to be burned in an on-site biomass plant, which is then used to run the chillers that cool the garden's flower dome and cloud forest conservation, really heightening the self-sustaining system. A more interest take is looking at indigenous people. The Ifugao indigenous peoples in the Philippines, and among others, have practiced the virtues and principles of circular economies for centuries to ensure that their livelihoods is perpetuated. They're known to practice permaculture, using methods such as planting multiple species together in order to promote biodiversity and increasing productivity. They are also well-known stewards of the UNESCO World Heritage Site, the Cordilleras rice terraces, and is sustained by their complex agricultural system, an indigenous system of natural resource management passed down by earlier generations. This system is articulated efficiently by the whole community through the rich understanding of the local biodiversity and finely tuned annual system of the lunar cycle, land zoning and planning, water conservation, and more. And not only that, they have the Muyong tradition, wherein it follows customary laws pertaining to land rights, adoption of upland cultivation, practices following soil and water conservation principles, land management to promote ample supply of wood and full fuel wood, and biodiversity protection. Ifugao groups and among other indigenous communities around the world don't see the land around them just a source of living, but their home. They're an example in which we can learn how to embed such virtues into our cultures, ensuring that we are able to harmonize life with nature and take what is given and give what is taken. So just briefly wrap up, circular economy is a transformative economic system where value is attributed to waste. It elevates economic, environmental, and social practices, essentially making society very circular. A global transition to a circular system can be integral solution to issues that are now aggressively interlinked with other issues, aka wicked problems. There are already areas around the world that demonstrate circularity not only in practice, but is interwoven in the fabric of their culture. It should not just be seen as an alternative, but a gold standard, the new status quo, to ensure sustainability far into the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Glyre, for this really engaging and thought-provoking presentation. I'm sure everyone in the audience has learned a lot from this presentation about circular economy and these successful case studies. So I'm sure people also have questions to ask, but what we'll do is we'll go straight into James's presentation, and then at the end there'll be time for a Q&A with everyone in the audience. So if you have some questions now, please keep them in your heads or write them down, and then we'll share them at the end and have some time to ask all these questions. So without further ado, we'll transition into James's presentation on path dependence and pattern disruption in mitigating climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juliette and Glyre. Thank you. That was a very good presentation, and circular economy is my bread and butter right now in my 9-to-5 job, and so it's something I'm very sympathetic towards. So I really sympathized and appreciated the message you put forward there. So thank you very much. Now, are my slides, am I showing them myself, or is the moderator or the organizer going to show them?
I think you might be putting them up yourself.
Okay.
If that works.
Yep, that's fine. I can do that. Just wanted to check so there's no duplication. So bear with me while I pull that up. Now, today the presentation primarily centers around, and before I get my slides up, I won't go into too much detail, but centers around the need to mitigate climate change through disruptive forces, especially in achieving technological readiness level and commercial readiness in clean technology, but assessing some of the barriers associated with achieving that. So let me just start this slide. Here we go, slideshow. Start from the beginning. Okay, and share screen. So bear with me. Here we go. Yeah. All right, can everyone see that?
Yeah, you can see it.
Fantastic. All right, excellent. So path dependence is a phenomena that is when a variety of forces or a variety of influences are leading us to stay on track to do something. So it sets us on a path to do something, and the perception of path dependence is that it is too costly and timely, and it takes too much effort and coordination to get us off the path of doing something. And then the antidote to that is what's called pattern disruption, something that comes along and sets a line in the path dependence that disrupts the pattern we've been on for a while. Now, these aren't just buzzwords. I want to emphasize these are academic terms, and there are lots of academic circles and lots of academic articles that discuss the concept of path dependence and pattern disruption in the context of mitigating climate change. And today I'm just going to give you one perspective on it. That's more of a commercial lens, but there's plenty of lenses through government, civil society, international relations, and so forth. So today, though, is going to be focused on the commercial lens of disrupting the path dependence that we find ourselves on. Now, can everyone see that? Did it move slides correctly?
Yeah.
Fantastic. We all know that given that COP28 has just started and we all read the headlines, we all know we're at a very concerning point. As of a week and a half ago, the world, for the first time ever, post-industrial revolution, has exceeded 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. That's really, really concerning. And that's the level we set in Copenhagen. That was the threshold we did not want to pass, as set in Copenhagen in 2009. And in the Paris COP of 2015, we said, oh, we actually would rather get it down to 1.5 degrees as the threshold, if that's okay. And I tell you what, that's a dead prospect, I hate to say. And as you can see on these charts, year after year after year, the seasonal averages around the world are getting hotter and hotter. And we are not on a good trajectory. In fact, the trajectory shows we're on a 3 to 4 degree warming trajectory, which has very adverse implications. Implications like what happened in Sydney, where I live, in 2019, where we had really tremendous bushfires. We had, which killed 1 billion animals across the entire continent. Yes, that's 1 billion with a B. And we had horrific heat and a really record-breaking drought. And those things combined led to the result of what you're seeing now, a calamitous apocalyptic scenario that is climate change in real time. And these sites, I hate to say, they're not just from 2019 in Sydney. You only had to look at Europe over the last 2 summers, and you saw these same things happening, these record-breaking incidents happening. It is so apparent that climate change is here, and yet 80% of all our global energy usage is still fossil fuels. And that number has not budged for a long time, because even as we've scaled up the amount of renewable energy in the world, we've also scaled up the amount of fossil fuels. And that's particularly because of countries like China, India, Indonesia, etc. A lot of these developing countries who might see gas, for example, as a transitional fuel, despite the fact that gas emits methane. And you also got countries like China that I said before, who, despite their great efforts in green tech, are still erecting record amounts of coal-fired power plants. It's simply not sustainable. O'Brien 2018, which is the source at the bottom here, breaks down a heuristic of what it takes to achieve positive climate action at scale. And there are practical, political, and personal factors at both a micro, meso, and macro scale that need to manifest in order to overcome climate change and achieve a reasonable degree of warming. Now, that 1.5 degree target might have been realistic in 2018, but already 5 years later, that's now irrelevant. We're now looking at more 3 to 4 degrees warming. However, from a practical standpoint, but also the personal and political standpoint, one of the key barriers to achieving good climate change action has been that we haven't had the technological readiness level, what's called TRL, which is a scale of 1 to 9 that assesses the maturity of technology. So 1 being conceptual, experimental, 9 being it's actually commercialized, 9 being maybe it's not commercialized, sorry, but the technology is ready to scale. However, even when it gets to TRL level 9, clean tech and green tech may not have what's called commercial readiness index, which is the CRI, the blue bar on the right-hand side there. So as you can see, you could be at a technological readiness level that is from 2 to 8.5, but you could still be in phase 1 of commercial readiness index. So one of the big issues and one of the big patterns or the path dependence, I should say, that has hindered climate action for a long time is that we have great technology that gets incubated through organizations and universities and companies and startups, but we don't actually know how to commercially scale it. This is what's called the commercialization valley of death. And this is the big hindrance in the pattern disruption needed to disrupt the path dependence, the dangerous path dependence, I might add, of climate change we're currently on, which is basically when technology is ready to go, it hits technological readiness level number 9, but there's a big funding gap between the initial venture capital, seed capital to help, grow and foster the technology, and the ability to get the rest of the capital and de-risk capital to actually scale this technology. So even if the technology is ready, unfortunately, the commercial viability or the commercial appetite to fund and scale that technology might not be there. And this has been a big issue for a long time for a lot of climate change technology. And that has kept us on this path dependence of, fossil fuels that are at a very pernicious level without actually manifesting the pattern disruption of clean tech at scale that we need in order to combat climate change. Luckily, there is this graph. Now, Diamandis and Kotler 2012, they work at a university. Well, it's not really a university, it's more of a think tank called Singularity University. And in 2012, they wrote a book, and the book is called Abundance: The Future is Better Than You Think. And what they tried to argue is look at historical technologies that have followed this trajectory. Now, importantly, what you have to realize is that as technology advances, as research and development happens, you get to the point where you can actually make it for cheaper through various commercial and technological means. What happens then is it actually becomes less materially intensive, which then democratizes the technology at scale. In other words, if you can get to a point with technology, especially climate change and climate change technology and green tech, where you can demonetize, therefore dematerialize, therefore democratize, and therefore scale clean tech at scale, that's how you can get over this commercialization valley of death, and how you can move from a technological viability to a commercial viability at scale. And this framework is what we depend on, especially if we're going to achieve the practical, political, and personal characteristics necessary to combat climate change at scale. I'm going to go into 2 case studies here that demonstrate my point. So beforehand, that was the theoretical framework. That was the narrative I was telling there. But what does this look like in reality? What are the tangible examples we can turn to that actually demonstrate what this looks like in reality and why there is hope that we can use these 6 Ds of exponential technology disruption to overcome the path dependence we find ourselves on? And this first example is an Australian company called SunDrive, which has been getting a lot of attention in Australia as of recent. As you can see in the right-hand photo there, Anthony Albanese was touring the factory of SunDrive not too long ago, and the federal government is helping SunDrive to commercialize their technology, offering tens of millions of dollars of funding to help enable it to reach that point of dematerialization and democratization. This has a lot of prospect because solar energy unfortunately depends a lot on annual industrial silver, but we don't have enough silver commensurate to the amount of demand we project for solar energy. So it's not actually the silver that we use currently in current solar panel technology is not commensurate to the amount we need to actually scale solar to meet our climate change targets. What SunDrive is trying to do is employ novel solar cell metallization technology, which is based around the use of copper instead of silver. I'm not going to go into all the detail about how they get to that point, but basically it means that they can cut costs by about 30%. And there's also a lot more copper in the world. Copper is about 100 times cheaper than silver and 1,000 times more abundant. So all of a sudden, through dematerializing solar panels, as SunDrive Solar have done, they're actually able to demonetize it and make it cheaper and democratize it because there's a lot more copper in the world and it's a lot cheaper. So SunDrive Solar in Australia, but increasingly globally, is a great demonstration of, next slide, hang on, there we go. A great demonstration of these 6 Ds, especially that final step, or 3 steps, I should say. demonetize, dematerialize, democratize. And by overcoming those barriers that are inherent within the expense and the material of clean technology, especially solar panels, through using this framework, they've been able to help overcome the commercialization valley of death, to move from a technological reality into a commercially viable and scalable reality, to scale solar energy in a way that is realistic, that does not demand the amount of silver otherwise needed, but not available to achieve our climate change targets. That is really impressive and really important. And that disrupts a pernicious path dependence we otherwise would have found ourselves on, and creates a pattern disruption to overcome that path dependence. Also, this overcomes the practical barriers, like the technical barriers, but also the political barriers as well, because politicians are happy to jump on board a technology when it has great commercial and practical viability and does not pose risk of failure and therefore looking bad to them. So they're happy to get behind technology that's going to work, which is, in this case, it absolutely is working. And once you've sorted out, as this graph implies, once you've sorted out those practical issues at the core, as SunDrive Solar has done, you get the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, for example, coming to their factory, offering them tens of millions of dollars of funding to scale up the production of their technology. So by incorporating the O'Brien 2018 principles, they've overcome practical and therefore political barriers and inertia to scaling their technology. The second and final case study I want to refer to is a New York-based startup called LO3 Energy. Now, LO3 Energy are a microgrid company. So they depend on blockchain as an underlying technology to get local neighborhoods within New York City to actually have their own self-organizing networks of power. So while they might have an energy wholesaler provide the energy to the local community, what LO3 Energy does, it skips the retailer and then jumps straight down to the local community level, whereby using blockchain as a transparent ledger that it promotes accountability and trust, they can actually have peer-to-peer intra-neighborhood trading of clean energy, in this case, solar energy, that helps enable local democratized energy take up, which is a lot cheaper and also means that the local community has a lot more say and can benefit, can actually gain revenue through selling their own solar electricity to their neighbors. So this is a really big movement because it helps really democratize energy and changes the mindset around energy. Energy doesn't have to be an expense. Energy can be something that is at the local community level and generates its own revenue for the benefits of members of that neighborhood, while also reducing emissions. So this is what basically, as I said before, this is what a microgrid is. You have a utility grid, which is a wholesaler, but then it goes straight from the utility grid down to the microgrid, which can achieve all these outcomes listed below in this graph here at the bottom line. So in other words, they're now collaborating with Siemens, which is a big German energy company, and they're now piloting and hopefully scaling the microgrid concepts across a number of different neighborhoods in the United States. It plays a crucial role in reducing energy loss as well, because often what happens is 5% of electricity is lost in transit when it's done at scale through retailers and through poles and wires, but they're actually able to leverage more electricity because the transmission of energy within the neighborhood is not as vast. So that physics issue you otherwise have of losing energy in transmission, they don't have, which is actually another really good practical benefit this LO3 Energy startup offers to these people. I'm going to sort of then bring it down to the first 3 Ds, because what this does very well through blockchain is it digitizes what is otherwise a relatively analog process. By using digital technology of blockchain, you've actually digitized the process of receiving and selling energy in your local community. Now, deceptive refers to the fact that perhaps it's a bit too innovative and a bit too cutting edge, which people get deceptive about and they think it's not going to work. But then it gets to the third stage here, which is disruptive, in which case the deception and the doubts have been overcome, and you now see a very disruptive tendency that is disrupting the regular wholesale and the regular retail electricity market in order to have peer-to-peer local energy lending and energy uptake. So this demonstrates particularly the first 3 stages of the 6Ds framework, but also makes it cheaper, makes it less materially intensive, and does democratize energy. So it does also feed into stages 4, 5, and 6 of this 6Ds framework. Also, it's very practical, as I said, which means that politically it's palatable amongst people. But also on a personal level, I want to emphasize what LO3 energy does very well is it changes the mindset and the worldview around energy. And that energy is something that can actually be empowering, that helps, it connects within the local community, builds community cohesion, can create revenue for people, and is something that can be community-based. Overcoming the old mindset that it's just a couple of oligarchical energy retailers that otherwise might be slow and bureaucratic and profit-driven, this helps democratize the idea of energy. So from a practical standpoint, going back to the O'Brien 2018 model, it actually serves a very good purpose. In conclusion, practical, political, and personal dimensions either enable or disable decarbonisation efforts. Technological and commercial readiness often stand in the way of scaling and commercialising climate tech innovations. However, exponential innovation using the 6Ds framework democratise climate tech to overcome these technical and commercial barriers. And that is demonstrated by the 2 case studies I've shown you here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, James, for that incredible presentation. It was really interesting to see how you've managed to use these quite complex academic and very essential academic terms to really illustrate some of these processes that we're currently seeing as we try to scale up climate tech. And I hope this is inspiring and informative to our viewers as they go on to engage with ideas such as climate tech, scaling up barriers that can sometimes stop, hinder innovation, and how can we progress beyond them. So I'm sure, as I do, our audience have quite a few questions. So I think what we'll do is we'll start out with our Q&A.
Sorry, Juliette, I
I'll
think your
leave
connection's a bit choppy.
Yeah.
1 to 2 questions for each of you as our audience submits questions to the chat. So if you have any questions, please write them in the chat box. And once you've submitted your question, I'll be able to pick from them, and you'll be able to ask your question directly to our speakers today. So first, I wanted to ask Glyre. So you introduced these case studies, very interesting, a number of case studies. Oh, we know. I'll just. Can you hear me better now?
That's
Can
better.
you hear me okay now?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's better.
It's okay now.
Keep going. I think the audio is better now, so keep going with what you were doing just then. I think she might have logged out. All right. Well, she did say in the chat. Let's start with Ethan's question while I get my connection back. So I think in the name of what Julia instructed, we might start with Ethan's question. Ethan, you asked me what tools does TRL use and how accurately does it work? So that's a very good question. I know there's 2 questions there. I'll get to the second one soon. TRL is a NASA developed it. So NASA actually were the founders of that idea. Now, is it absolutely 100% accurate? Not necessarily. It is a heuristic of sorts in that it is a mental shortcut So it is operating off sort of broader principles and perhaps, more nebulous concepts, but by and large, it is relatively accurate to a notable degree, albeit not completely accurate. And in terms of the tools it uses, a lot of it is just sort of qualitative perception and where it sort of sits within, an anecdotal or qualitative assessment in its technological readiness level and journey. So it's not quite necessarily 100% accurate to the T, but it's a heuristic that's commonly used in both government and commercial circles. So it's good enough, I guess, for the purpose it needs to serve. Now, I'm also going to look at LO3 energy, your question regarding that. And LO3 energy can be used privately. And in fact, it is. It's done through an app. So you use an app on your phone, and then you understand what everyone else is doing, though. So you have your part of the grid, the microgrid, that services your apartment. And then you then you can trade your energy with other people and vice versa. So it's sort of a peer-to-peer lending platform using the blockchain as a transparency and accountability mechanism that underpins that. So there's multiple devices, one in every house through the phone on the app. And it shares the system with neighbors, but obviously that's just a communal database, not that there's a communal tool, if that answers your question. Sorry, Juliette, you're back now. I answered Ethan's question.
Great.
As you instructed.
Thank you.
So we'll get back to it.
That's perfect. Can you all hear me okay now?
Yep.
Does that seem to be a bit better? Okay, great. Sorry about that. Sometimes Chinese Zoom, I think, isn't the most worker user friendly. So I'll ask a question to Glyre, and keep sending in your questions if you're still thinking of some. So Glyre, I really liked your use of two very different case studies. So we had the Japanese case study and the Philippines, the indigenous bottom-up case study. So I wanted to ask a little bit of a comparative question. So obviously you've discussed one case, which is in the context of a developed country, and then another one in the context of a country which is obviously developing these initiatives on a more local basis. So what are the differences that we need to take into account when we're promoting, adapting, and implementing this model in developing countries? Are there specific challenges that we need to look at when we're initiating something from the bottom up? And are there specific advantages as well, which you could maybe discuss with us?
So I'd like to use my home country, Philippines, as an example. I think with the instituting circular economy structure from a bottom up, designers need to consider the context, since the majority of the areas in the Philippines are susceptible to hazards, natural disasters. As you guys probably read a number of geography books, Philippines is up there for the most highly susceptible to natural disasters. And when formulating and conceptualizing circular economy at the ground up, you need to be very contingent towards the disasters. You need to build incentives and have a robust backbone to be able to mitigate and essentially to have a circular economy that still sustains through these natural disasters. And I think that the advantages in introducing developing economies is that I've mentioned in the last case study, there's already a spirit of what a circular economy already looks like. I think fostering that culture and spreading it outwards and laterally to society will benefit developing countries as a whole and essentially for posterity as well. I'm not sure if I answered the question correctly.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Thanks for your answer. So I see, James, you have another question from Mukhtar. And maybe Mukhtar, if you want to, I don't know how you did it for the last question, but it could be nice to have people put their microphones on and ask the question so that we can hear your voices as well, if that's possible. So if you'd like to ask your question, Mukhtar, or otherwise, James, you can go straight into answering it.
Yeah, I'll give Mukhtar another few seconds, although he might not be able to turn his audio on. Okay, I'll just get to answering it. Mukhtar, look, here in Nigeria, we're facing the issue of media climate change. Can we have a technological solution to solve using blockchain, please? So going to assume you refer to media bias and media misinformation regarding climate change. Look, that's a great issue to focus on. And that's something that unfortunately gets peddled. Misinformation on climate change is promulgated a lot through media, and all types of media, traditional media, but increasingly social media. And it ties into a lot of conservative and far right movements, unfortunately, and it sort of ties into a bit of an anti-globalist sentiment sometimes, and that kind of discourse that unfortunately can be quite dangerous. Look, blockchain, to the best of my knowledge, does not resolve that issue. I guess you could argue through a sense of transparency about who is spreading misinformation, you might be able to combat climate change misinformation, although I'm not sure how that might work. I guess if you want to just sort of tie it back down to the principles of blockchain and the use of blockchain as a transparency and accountability avenue and a way of promoting communal understanding and communal action, then perhaps it democratizes the discussion at scale, which could overcome media bias. So I could see how the principles of blockchain could actually play an important role. However, to what extent that could play out practically and what that would look like as a solution in the detail, I'm not necessarily sure. And that's something I would love to see a solution to. If you could figure out a way to use blockchain to overcome media misinformation, go for it. I would love to see it. Unfortunately, to the best of my knowledge, no such intersection of blockchain and combating misinformation exists. That's the best I could answer that question.
Thanks, James. I think you've just created an avenue for some new research there. So great to see that collaboration going on there. So I'll just ask a question to James, one of the ones I had, and then I see there's another question coming into the inbox, so we can ask that in a moment. So one thing I was curious about in your presentation, so both case studies had very innovative solutions to the scalability problem, but I noticed that both of them were focused on solar panels, so photovoltaic energy. So I wanted to ask, I'm curious, is there a trend, are we seeing a trend of increasing facilitation of climate tech scaling in certain areas of climate tech? So for example, solar panels or wind energy, for example, are there some which are where it's easier to overcome these commercialization and technological scalability barriers? Or do you think that this is kind of an overall progression that we can see? Thank you.
Was that directed at both of us?
Directed to James specifically.
Okay. Yeah. Well, look, solar energy, like photovoltaics and batteries are the two big ones when it comes to where we've actually got quite a good technological readiness level and commercial readiness level to scale them. And we can see on the horizon within 5 to 10 years, we can scale them massively. And we're already seeing that, right? Batteries, especially utility scale batteries, but also the batteries for electric vehicles is, already here, right? And electric vehicle uptake, including in countries like China, but all over the world, is increasing exponentially. That is driven by the fact we have got the materials for batteries down to a small enough scale, but we have the storage capacity at a high enough scale to actually enable electric vehicles, electric transport, and utility scale storage in a grid, right? So batteries are a great example of this, where through R&D, we've hit that point where we've reached dematerialization, demonetization, and democratization. And as I said before, sun-drive solar doing what they're doing with copper now instead of silver, solar energy and photovoltaics, to use the technical term, is now scaling, right? And we're starting to see that as a viable long-term option, which is fantastic. The issue is more about those hard to abate sectors. So hydrogen, for example, which gets a lot of talk, hydrogen is fantastic. That's got great prospects in 15 to 20 years, I would say, but we don't really know how to scale it commercially yet to actually be effective at scale. But hydrogen is important as a storage mechanism to store electricity for the longer term, but also to abate, maritime, freight, and aviation, which otherwise are very hard to abate. Green steel as well, and decarbonizing steel, which amounts for quite a substantial amount of global greenhouse gas emissions. That's early days. There's a lot of discussion around that, but that's still at a technological readiness level that's quite low. So there are some sectors and some technologies where, like batteries and photovoltaics, where it's great. We're going through that 6D framework, but then there are some areas where we're still at that sort of, the perceptive stage, TRL 1, 2, 3 kind of stage. So it depends on the kind of technology you're talking about.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that's really helpful to understand a little bit better about the dynamics that we're currently seeing in that sector. Great. So I think there are a few questions that seem to pertain more to pollution, how to reduce pollution in Pakistan and in Indonesia as well. So this is clearly an issue that affects a lot of us here today, and how to protect human health. So I'm not sure if this is directed at, it's quite a broad question. These are quite broad questions. So I'm not sure how you two would like to tackle it, but perhaps Glyre, you could discuss how circular economy can respond to these issues.
I think this might be slightly off tangent to my topic that I've discussed, but I think the bigger issue in targeting congested vehicles in case studies like Pakistan or Lahore is the urban transport infrastructure. So just bear with me. From my understanding and experiences of working with urban transport infrastructure, you have to first understand that it's building a relationship towards the city and the city, and these relationships pertain to mainly car users, and which gave rise to low quality, highly carbonated motorized vehicles for those who don't have the luxury to use cars, which leads to this unfortunate social dynamics of car users on one side and those who have cars in areas of the city. So it's a very, very complex issue to target. I don't think circular economy is the right concept to answer such issue. So I think James might have a more adequate and competent approach to this.
Well, that was the question, basically how we combat pollution through the circular economy. Was that the crux of the question?
I think they were just asking in general.
Okay.
If either of you have, yeah.
I'm going to piggyback off what you were going on about Glyre regarding the circular economy. Because you raised a good point with transport, and transport's one of the hardest sectors to abate, in no small part because the fuel varies between sectors, and the ability to carry freight and maritime and aviation requires different technological capabilities and has its own technological limitations. How circular economy can help the transport sector, I don't think is really a matter of helping the transport sector itself, but rather the infrastructure facilitating transport. I'm going to speak to my own work I do here at the New South Wales government, where we look at how we can actually make roads and rail more sustainable and less carbon intensive. And a lot of the discussion that's happening right now is around the incorporation of recycled materials as replacement materials to carbon intensive materials within infrastructure. So for example, to what extent can glass or coal ash replace asphalt and cement in roads or rail, for example, which are important infrastructural assets that have very high scope 3 emissions and are very carbon intensive? How can we perhaps incorporate glass, which otherwise goes to landfill and gets burnt in a polluting manner, in a very linear economy oriented manner? How can we incorporate that into infrastructure? And likewise, if we're going to incorporate something like cement rather than a sustainable material in infrastructure, what are the emissions implications of that, especially through the whole of life cycle assessment of emissions? Why not use something like sand? Why not use something like green steel, for example, once that's capable of being scaled? So we need to think about the scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions of our transport infrastructure, which means a whole of life cycle assessment from production through to end usage. But we also then, once we assess the amount of carbon in that whole of life cycle assessment, then how do we then find suitable replacement materials to replace these carbon-intensive materials to help reduce the whole of life cycle carbon in transport infrastructure? That will be the way I answer that through a circular economy perspective.
Thank you to both for those valuable insights on this question. And yeah, I think both of you have put forward some very promising solutions to this issue, which is going to be one to tackle in the coming years. So I think as we seem to have run pretty much out of time, so I think we might have room for one more question. And if anyone in the audience has any last questions, now's the time. And if not, I do have one question which I would like to ask Glyre about to what extent cultural factors in countries can present either opportunities or obstacles to the implementation of this circular economy model. So I think that the example that you raised, which I really enjoyed, was Japan. And I wondered to what extent are there cultural factors which promote, for example, attitudes to recycling, certain maybe compliance with local recycling norms, and is this difficult to implement in other countries, perhaps? For example, in China, the use of secondhand clothes, not really something that's promoted here. So I wondered if you had some thoughts about that and if you'd be able to share them with us.
So some insightful insight actually in the Japanese case study. It actually took 6 months for the residents to get used to the new system. So by and large, culture in that context, the culture of approaching circular economy isn't birth, but it's made, especially in the developed countries who have for years and decades followed a narrow and myopic linear economy. Developing countries, anthropologically speaking, there seems to be more of high value attributed to materials that is otherwise seen as discarded waste in developing countries. In essence, there is more value for inhabitants of the developing countries to see and innovate waste in, for example, e-waste in Southeast Asia. So e-waste in Southeast Asia has garnered a lot of enterprises, it's informal enterprises, and not only e-waste, but discarded steelwork waste from Japan and neighboring countries across the Pacific. That's why you get these abundance of informal vehicles such as rickshaws that may not only have a lifespan of a couple of years, but the beauty of their own circular economy in Southeast Asia is that they manage to sustain their own innovations, own brilliant understanding of maintaining, sustaining, refurbishing their own craft without even a formal structure. So culture does certainly play a very strong factor in how we approach circularity. I think we see less value of it in the developed world, since we are now, have this luxury of not seeing where all the waste goes, right? We just put our waste in a bin and we carry on our day. But in developed countries, waste is unfortunately scattered everywhere where you go. In Manila, the waste is unfortunately, the moment you step out of the airport, you'll see waste everywhere, unfortunately, but it's just unfortunately just hidden, it's masked, there's a facade of just walls. And it's not just a hidden part of the city, but it's also a home for many of the urban inhabitants, and it's a source of income as well. So, but then again, yeah, I think I'll end it there. I think I've answered that question sufficiently.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you've driven home some very important messages there about adapting to certain cultural shifts, and also how much that can be ingrained depending on the status of socioeconomic development in a country. Well, thank you very much both for both your lectures, which you've provided with us today, and your answers to these questions. I think the audience and myself have been able to learn a great deal more about the operationalization of the green economy, different angles to it, the main obstacles we've been presenting, and some innovative solutions across the world. So I thank you again for attending today, and thank you also to our audience for remaining attentive throughout the presentation, and also such a pleasure to see so many people with curious minds, hoping to learn more about these issues from all these different countries. So thank you also to our organizers, and also I'll have and thank you to STEAR as well, Beatrice and Kevin. And I think we'll have a closing statement from the speakers as well, if you'd like to say a few words about today's panel before I hand it back over to the Istanbul Youth Foundation to end today's panel. So in order of the presentations, Glyre, would you like to say a few words first?
Thank you again for the opportunity to present about circular economy. I'm quite new with discussing this theme, so I appreciate you guys for bearing with my I guess maturing green harness, but I hope I've imparted some knowledge to you all today. And yeah, thank you, and all the best with the forthcoming summit.
And thank you so much, Glyre and Juliette, but also everyone here as well for attending. I know it might be a late or an inopportune time, depending on where you are in the world and what time zone you're in. But regardless, I appreciate you all being attentive the whole time. A big shout out to Beatrice as well, who's hiding somewhere in the Zoom panel above my screen. She was a fantastic organizer from the perspective of STEAR, and from the STEAR end, her and Juliette were really and Kevin, I should say, were the real architects behind getting us to this point, as in myself and Glyre presenting. So thank you very much.
Thank you to you too. And without further ado, I'll hand it back over to the Istanbul Youth Summit organizers to close today's meeting.
All right. Thank you so much, Juliette, James, and Glyre. Once again, guys, give a virtual applause to STEAR and also the committee. And to complete this session, let's just turn on your cam and we will have photo session together. I already sent you guys the link of the virtual background. And I do remind to you guys, if you can just change your virtual background, you can just change it. And for those who haven't submit the attendance, please fill the attendance right now. Okay, I will wait you for a minute, okay? I will send you guys the link again here on the chat. We still have more meetings, more pre-orientations meeting on next week. So please inform your friends that also joining the Istanbul Youth Summit, because next meeting is going to be the participant needs, okay? And you can ask Olaf anything about Istanbul Youth Summit again regarding the requirements and also the things that we should bring. And also, please, guys, if you haven't fulfilled the payment, please do it at max next week. We will monitor again for next week. Okay, because after this we will divide you into a group. Okay, if you haven't fulfilled the payment, we cannot proceed. So just fulfill the payment and then we can proceed to divide you guys as a group, and then you can make a social project from that group. All right, thank you so much. Let's go to take a picture together. I'm going to count 3, 2, 1, and right, once more. 3, 2, 1, and all right. Thank you so much, guys. See you guys next weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.